It's always a plus. We've got some good topics for you today. Cameron's going to be talking about activists who chased Kirsten Sinema into the bathroom, which you may remember. There's been some recommended charges for a few of those people. He's going to bring us an update on that story. And Tara is going to bring us a story about Dave Chappelle and his new special on Netflix and how it's ruffling some feathers of some people. But first, I want to talk about a story that's been in the news a lot the past couple of days. It happened yesterday afternoon/evening, and that is the fact that actor Alec Baldwin accidentally discharged a firearm yesterday on the set of his movie Rust, which he is both producing and starring in. And he accidentally discharged a firearm, and it struck two of the crew members, one of whom unfortunately passed away. That was the director of photography, Helena Hutchins. The other person who was struck was Joel Souza. He was injured, but he was released from the hospital today, and it looks like he's going to be okay. So we're thankful for that, obviously. Clearly, this is a tragedy that nobody would want to happen. I don't think any of us would wish something like that on anyone. Yeah. And it's terrible. I'm sure Alec Baldwin is just distraught. I know I would be. And so we're not here to make fun of him or poke at him in any way. Mm-hmm. But there has been some backlash going around, mostly on Twitter, because of a tweet that he sent out in 2017. To give some background of the tweet, there was an officer in Huntington Beach, California, and he shot a homeless man. The man was running at him, tried to pull something out of his belt. And so the officer took a couple of steps back, ended up having to fire at him, and ultimately killed him. It was later ruled that that was a justified shooting. It needed to happen. And this man that he ended up killing also was a murderer who had murdered someone in the past. So there was, obviously, we don't want any loss of life, but there was good reason for the shooting to happen, just for the protection of himself and others. And so when that happened, a lot of people initially thought that it was unjustified and that he didn't need to be shot. And Alec Baldwin tweeted about this, and it said, quote, "I wonder what it feels like to wrongfully kill someone." And unfortunately, now we know that Alec Baldwin has wrongfully killed someone. The intent obviously wasn't there, but this tragedy has happened, and it's sad, really. It's not anything to laugh about, not anything to smile about. But I think, to me, it's a little bit eye-opening of the fact that it's really easy when you're on the sidelines and when you're not a police officer, when you're not facing life-threatening decisions every day, to say, like, wow, this person is evil. This person shot someone. They took a life. They didn't need to do that. And now that it's happened to Alec Baldwin, I have a feeling that his eyes are a little bit more opened to what these officers go through every day, even in a situation when an officer does have to end a life because that person is threatening their own life. Even if it's a justified shooting, that's still something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. And you have to, remember the fact that you had to take a life. That's not something that's easy. It's not something that's lighthearted.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, we see this happening to Alec Baldwin. I wonder if you guys think that maybe this will open his eyes a little bit to kind of the trials that a police officer has to go through every day.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. Before I get into this, make sure you guys, if you're watching this, make sure you hit that like button. That really helps out a lot to make sure that we're getting these important stories over to you and to other viewers as well. But before now that we've got that taken care of, the whole situation with the Alec Baldwin story is just really tragic because it's bringing up attention to a lot of things that the entertainment industry might be dealing with. I know there's some calls for better gun safety on set when it comes to different props and stuff. And the union, the prop masters union, actually put out a statement today saying that this firearm had a live round in it. So the original impression was that Alec Baldwin was firing blanks. This is what happened, the accidental discharge of blanks. Those could still injure someone, especially if it's like this was a woman in this case. These could definitely hurt, seriously injure people. So what happened with this is the fact that it's a live round is going to be asking some serious questions, I assume, and I hope that there will be an investigation taking place to figure out why there was a live round in there. And I definitely think, at least in the entertainment industry, this is going to bring up some serious questions. So I think in terms of the tweet, though, I think it's so interesting that we have celebrities who really just, you can find their stance on literally everything on the internet now because we have Twitter, because we have Instagram. So I think it's just kind of more of a testament to the moment that we are in human history, generally speaking, that we can find someone's exact thoughts on a vaguely similar situation just years earlier. And I think that's just so interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting. And I know that this is a prop and things like that, but even if we look at his tweets, we can see that he knew it was an accident and goes, oh, I wonder what it's like to like wrongfully shoot someone, whatever, presumably on accident. And I think that this just brings up another point too. This isn't the only time that there's been like an accidental shooting. I know in Minnesota right now, there's another case of the Daunte Wright shooting where Kim Potter, she was a police officer for about 20 years, was on video and said, taser, 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 grabbed her gun and then shot him. And so there's this whole discrepancy right now on whether or not that was an accidental killing, because people are saying, no, you're liable because you should be responsible for knowing and looking and checking. And so I think it raises another level here and another question, because even after that investigation takes place, there has to be someone or at some level responsibility.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a point a lot of people have brought up, is that there have been accidental shootings both by police officers and on movie sets. This has happened before. It's rare, obviously, because there are safety protocols in place that are, when they're followed correctly, will prevent that kind of thing from happening. But it has happened before that there's been, an accidental shooting on a set, and people have died before. So it's a risk that can happen. Another interesting thing that I've seen from people on Twitter, from a couple of news outlets, is sort of this argument about whether this is a testament to the fact that there needs to be more gun control, or if this is a testament to there needs to be more education about how to use a firearm. Alec Baldwin has been a pretty staunch gun control activist for most of his professional careers. Got plenty of tweets and positions that he's made publicly about how he doesn't like guns. He thinks that most of them should not be allowed. He's using a gun on a movie set, and by all accounts, it seems that he wasn't following any of the traditional gun safety protocols. I mean, anyone who has fired a firearm understands you don't point the gun at people. You always treat the gun as if it's live, as if it's loaded, and you keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. I mean, these are basic things, and it seems, we don't have all the facts, so we don't like to speculate too much, but at the very least, he was pointing it at someone he shouldn't be pointing it at, and he had his finger on the trigger. Whether he was trying to fire it or not, we're not really sure. But there are some things that he could have done to probably prevent this tragedy from happening. And so do you think that this is a sign that, maybe we should spend some more time educating people about safe practices when it comes to guns, instead of spending so much time arguing against guns altogether?
Well, I'm just going to say it's probably not going to happen on a Hollywood set, because those are such intense, like, the entertainment industry is just generally very tense. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different things going on. So I wouldn't be surprised if stuff like gun safety is going to get brushed to the wayside of all of this. Also, this is kind of slightly unrelated, but it's tied to this. The plot of the movie, Rust, if you go to IMDb, the original plot of the movie has to do with a 13-year-old, I believe it's a 13-year-old running away after the accidental murder of a rancher. There is just some, I don't know, I read this whole thing. When you piece this all together, there's just a lot of creepiness to this whole situation. It just kind of adds to the tragedy and the weird irony of it too. So like I said, I'm wondering if the unions already have a lot of safety regulations, particularly when it comes to props and safety and different things, but so many people in the entertainment industry are either so self-involved or so overly heated about things that things like basic safety and basic care for the people working on your set and for the actors knowing how to properly use their props, I think that's going to be something that I would hope the mentality would change. But as we've seen before, this incident has happened, and I don't think there's the conversation about gun control in this doesn't really make any sense because he thought it was a
Yeah.
prop.
Well, and I guess the real question here is that for many conservatives, it's the freedom to have a gun, the freedom to do what you want to do. But again, it goes back to this whole concept of how are we educating people on guns? How are we educating people around weapons? Because we see these kinds of accidental shooting deaths time and time again. I know that in my own family, there's some family friends that we had where someone in their family died because they didn't realize a gun was loaded. And so it's having these conversations and making sure that people are actually aware of what's going on when you handle a gun. And just to be honest, like I have never ever shot a gun, but my family owns guns. And so my parents really emphasized to me basic gun safety. You act like it's loaded. You don't pretend to shoot someone. You never have your hand on the trigger. And it's just those basic qualities. And I think that it's not unreasonable to, have these kinds of basic things taught in schools because these accidents do happen and it would stop a lot from happening. And the other thing I want to point out here is that everyone today is looking at this and going, oh my gosh, this was a tragedy. Like, I just kind of want to point out the fact that Alec Baldwin never gave that cop any grace in his shooting when he was doing a job, when he was under threat. He never gave him any grace. And today, everyone's trying to assume the best and be like, hey, there was an accident here. Something did happen. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that this kind of wakes people up and are like, wow, we need to rethink this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's interesting. We need to move on here, so I'll just say this quickly. But I think it's interesting that you make the point of teaching it in schools because it kind of is similar to me of kind of sex ed classes and the debate that's happened around them of the fact, people say you shouldn't just teach abstinence because that's not effective. Yeah. You should teach children how to engage safely if they're going to, and then you should encourage abstinence if you want to. I think you could say the same thing about guns. I mean, even if you hate guns, you want gun control, I think it's still valuable to teach people how to use a gun. And then you can still say, we'd rather you not use them. We think you shouldn't use them, whatever. I would disagree, but that's fine. But to just say guns are evil and we're never going to learn how to use them, I think that kind of logic leads to tragedies like we saw yesterday. Obviously, this is a heavy discussion. Hopefully, we're going to move on to a little bit more of a lighter one here with Tara. She's going to bring us some Dave Chappelle news.
Yeah, more Dave Chappelle news because, as everyone knows, humor's canceled. You can't be funny anymore. You can't make a joke at anyone's expense. I personally do it to both Grant and Cameron every day at the office. HR does not like me. But anyways, Dave Chappelle obviously has been in the news recently just because of his recent takes on Netflix with his new special that came out, and apparently he had made some anti-trans jokes or comments, what have you. So he kind of effectively got canceled. Netflix staged this walkout, kind of just showing that they care and oh my gosh, this is so bad. We can't have any jokes about this. And so Chappelle and his team reached out to them, and he even ended the special with this, and he said, hey, I will sit down with you. I will have a conversation with you. Just let me know when and where, and I'll do it. Well, apparently, some people have reached out to him, but it's none of the employees at Netflix. The actual organizer of the walkout doesn't even work at Netflix. Yes. She's a workshop conductor, so she goes in and talks about herself all day, apparently, because this person's trans. So her name's Ashley Marie Preston, and she was actually the first openly trans person to run in California, so she has that under her belt. But I just think it's funny that the media is reporting this as, oh my gosh, Netflix takes a stand for trans people, Netflix did this, and then none of these Netflix people actually organized the march themselves, number one. And number two, not a single Netflix person has actually wanted to reach out to Dave Chappelle. There's some kind of cloudiness on whether or not Ashley Preston and Dave Chappelle are going to talk. Apparently, they've been passing each other like ships in the night. But my first real question is, why is there no one at Netflix who is actually protesting? Like, do you think it becomes one of those situations where it's like everyone else is doing it, so I'm gonna hop on the train?
Yeah, Cameron, you're a former stand-up comedian who's been booed off the stage for telling inappropriate and crude jokes. So I'd love to hear your take on this.
I did one open mic night in 2018, and I ran an improv team. So with that very limited experience that I have, my even more limited experience talking about social issues, I will say that the concept of kind of mob mentality is very interesting. Like, I'll even say, like, But before I became a conservative, I did the March for Our Lives because I kind of went along with that like train of thought for a while. And I'll say, I bet there are a lot of people at Netflix that are upset about this, but I have a feeling that no one, I'm sure there are a few people that feel motivated that I'm going to take a stand, I'm going to walk out, I'm going to do all this stuff. But I will say, though, the fact that there was such hesitancy to like have a conversation with people about, oh, if you find this offensive, I'm just going to be outraged. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to do all these other weird things that aren't actually going to do anything. And the fact that I believe Dave Chappelle has offered to like talk with these people is so important because it shows that, you know, he was probably not malintentioned with his humor. So I think the discussion about all of this is really important to kind of discover whether or not like what's considered offensive and what's not now. But I definitely think the most important thing is having conversations to start off with. And I think what really bothers me a lot is the idea of, oh, I'm going to passively taking a stand, where people think that if I'm outraged about something, that somehow gives me some sort of like moral clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in a weird way, it's almost like encouraging to me that this person didn't work for Netflix, because it kind of tells me like, hey, maybe not every employee, this company is woke, but maybe not every employee is like so angered by jokes about a transgender person that they're going to walk out. The fact that it was like somebody outside the organization kind of trying to stir up trouble. I have my own issues with that. And I think that people shouldn't be going around doing that, obviously, but it's almost encouraging to me in that maybe there's like a little bit more sanity at Netflix than I thought there was.
Yeah, and it's funny, just to go off on March in Our Lives, I was actually in high school too when that happened, and I walked out too, but not for the reason you'd expect. I had a sign that we had to turn in. We had to turn in our signs to like make sure that they were okay. So I had written on mine, protect our children, protect our schools, protect 2A. Yeah, I went to go get my sign. That was completely taken away. So thank you, high school admin, for that. So we walked out for different reasons. But I guess this kind of goes back, just getting back to the Dave Chappelle issue. Do you think that there's kind of any reason why Dave Chappelle should apologize? I mean, I clearly think that we all are going to be like, absolutely not. But are there any jokes that should be completely off the table? Is there anything like that? Like, should we be more free speech with them, or are there certain lines we just shouldn't cross?
I would say the lines that should be crossed in, like the lines that should not be crossed in comedy are pretty, people should already be well aware of what those are. But I think the issue is that the line is constantly changing, like the bar for what that is and what it isn't.
It's a moving goalpost.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really difficult part with all of this. But I'll say that Dave Chappelle should not apologize, at least publicly, for whatever this. I didn't watch the Dave Chappelle special. I have not really had the time or the interest to watch this. But as someone who's just done with every single thing in entertainment, I will say that he should probably not apologize, because it also sets a bad precedent for people in his industry too. He has a responsibility for other comics who maybe say things on the bit of the edgier side, to stand up for them too and not bow down to the mob in this sense. So, like I said, haven't watched the Dave Chappelle special. I might watch and I might be like, this best thing ever, or it might be absolutely terrible. But as far as I know, apologizing almost never, publicly never does what it needs to.
Yeah, once you apologize to the left and to the radical progressives on that side, you're never going to stop apologizing. It will be a constant apology after apology after apology, because they will not be appeased. If he came out today and he said, I'm so sorry I made these transphobic jokes, they might quiet down for a few minutes, but then they would find something else that he did that they were angry about. So once you start doing that, it's a never-ending cycle. I wouldn't apologize like you said, at least publicly fire him. If there's someone who is really hurt and they reach out to him, then okay, he can say to them, I'm sorry that, I made you feel this way. That wasn't my intention. But a public apology, I think, is not a good idea. I also have not seen the special, but from what I understand, he tells a few of these jokes, and then he tells a story about a transgender comedian who he was good friends with who passed away, and he tells how much that affected him and how much she meant to him. So I don't think that it's a malicious sort of intent of him being like, I'm going to say transgenders are terrible. I think that he kind of comes at it from both sides, from what I understand.
Tara, did you watch the special?
I have seen bits and pieces on Twitter. I haven't sat down and actually watched the full thing.
Okay.
But
the 20-somethings.
Yeah. So it's definitely interesting. And I think that there just goes to show this kind of idea where in order to live life, you have to risk being offended. Like, even the idea that no one can be offended ever, it's like, how entitled is that statement? Like, to assume that you can go through life and never have anything said to you that you're just going to disagree with. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, but...
Yeah, I totally agree. Another thing that's crazy is people chasing politicians into bathrooms, which we talked about a few weeks ago, and we now have an update on that story that Cameron's going to bring us.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I am an Arizona State University student, and Kristen Sinema was chased into a bathroom a few hundred feet from where I sleep at night, so that was terrifying on many levels to see that video happen. But you guys, most of you have probably seen the clip of Kristen Sinema getting chased into the bathroom by pro-illegal immigration protesters, including one of which who filmed her while she was in the bathroom stall. That breaks Arizona state law. It violates a ton of other things. But the latest news with this has to do with the Arizona State University Police Department is now recommending charges for 4 people involved in this chasing situation. They're recommending criminal charges for illegally filming her, chasing her, hunting her down, for just this complete lack of any sort of courtesy. So my question to you guys is, we are all aware of this clip. We've all seen it. Mm-hmm. Do you think, from what we have seen, should charges be filed based on that recommendation?
I think at any point you're threatening someone and chasing them into the bathroom, that there's charges that are going to be filed. I know if that happened to me, I would be all up in arms. I'd get an attorney. I would do whatever possible. Mm-hmm. I think that it's totally acceptable to have those charges done because there's just certain lines, too, within society where people are willing to cross them now. When you brand conservatives or when you brand people on the right as evil, everything becomes permissible under evil. And that's like what we're seeing time and time again here. People have no concept of things that are just like, oh, like this is off limits. I shouldn't go here, and we've lost that because we've completely become polarized. And so I think that charges do need to be filed. There needs to be something that's done to make a public denouncement of this. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden even came out and said, well, that's part of doing the job, or that's part of being a representative. And so it's just disgraceful from the top down. I hope charges will be filed, but I'm betting that the Biden admin will step in and be like, no, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah, and I believe it's up to Maricopa County now if they actually want to prosecute these people. And honestly, I'm kind of in agreement that I do think that they should file charges for this and they should prosecute these 4 individuals. And I say that as someone who is at this campus, and it makes me feel very unsafe. It probably makes a lot of other people feel very unsafe that we just have people that are able to kind of get into the building and chase a member of the faculty down. Even though she is a United States Senator, she is also a professor at the School of Social Work too. So there were students involved in this that were also considered victims in this situation, as far as I know. So I feel like this is charges would set the correct precedent. But Arizona State University too also needs to take action to make sure that things like this don't happen. I don't even know if they condemned this incident. They might have, and I would like to be wrong on that. And I'm hoping that Michael Crow probably gave his usual whatever.
Yeah, you guys should have just chased her to the stall, not followed her in. But other than that,
not into the bathroom.
So I'll say, as a student, I would really like to see these people prosecuted just for campus safety reasons in general. Grant, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. And it's a big part of it is because we've seen a huge influx in these kind of things. People showing up at other people's houses, people harassing senators or politicians at restaurants or stores or wherever it is. I'm generally not in favor of, making an example out of someone. I don't want to say they should prosecute these people so that it will, show everyone else what happens if you do something like this. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I do think
you chase a woman into the bathroom.
Yes.
I
I do think there should be a precedent set that you cannot chase people into the bathroom, and
I
if
feel
you
like
do that,
set in first grade.
yeah, you would think so. But I mean, we see these things. I mean, no, I haven't heard a politician come out and specifically say, like, it's great that somebody follows someone to the bathroom. I have heard people suggest that it's okay to go to people's houses, things like that. I
Yeah.
think that we need to take a stand against things like that. If you want to call your local senator, if you want to complain about what they're doing at the office, okay. But to go to someone's house, to follow them in a stall, I mean, there are things that we need to discourage. And I think the only way to really do that is if there are criminal charges filed against people who break the rules.
Yeah, and this is a line that has been crossed. Like, understand that this was illegal before, and that's not a political thing either. If you follow someone to the bathroom and you film them, that's not good.
That's a humanity issue.
Yeah, that's just wrong
Yeah.
on 25 different levels. So I think to have these charges be filed, even if it wasn't a senator, I would still agree with that idea in the first place. But I will say that kind of the incidents that have happened in the past few months, whether it was last June with all the riots that we had in January with all these things, what has been happening in our culture is this idea that boundaries and certain things can be broken that are just totally out of the rational sense of what would be considered normal civil disobedience. Because let's just say there's a difference between not wearing your mask at Walmart when they're requiring a mask or whatever, and following someone into the bath. Like, do you understand where the line of civil disobedience is?
And it's funny because it's like, why is civil disobedience so not civil anymore? It's because society has lost all civility. That's why the line is so far.
We have a world where looting a Target and storming the Capitol are considered acceptable, like by the fringes of groups, and that's not rational. And that's when you have situations like this where you can have women senators being chased into bathroom. I keep repeating that because it is just so ludicrous and disgusting that is the bar that we've come to. Oh, in order to advocate for my cause, her silence is violence, or whatever other kind of saying they'll toss around. So now it's morally justifiable for me to do this. That is, who raised them? Who raised them is what I want to know, where people think that bar is acceptable and it's not. That's kind of this thing too, where it's like we have grown so secular and so like amoral as a society that we think our political agenda is always going to be in alignment with every action that we take in response.
Yeah, I think Trump talked about this a lot during his presidency. People mocked him for it. He kept saying over and over, law and order. We need law and order. That was one of his main talking points that he discussed, especially towards the end of his presidency and as he ran for re-election. I think that's just something we don't have much of anymore. And I'm probably going to get criticized for this, but to me, a leftist world is one where there isn't law and order. They don't like law and order. They wouldn't come out and say it to your face, but they have no problem with looting a Target. They have no problem with somebody going into a bathroom. They have to pretend like they have a problem with it and say, oh, maybe don't do that. That's kind of bad. But deep down, they think that if they don't get their way, they should loot a Target or they should follow someone in the bathroom. And I think that is where it all stems from, is that they truly believe these are necessary and appropriate steps to take. And I think it's just a difference of the way they view the world.
Well, they need to check your vaccine card before you loot the Target.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the rule.
That's first.
Like let's be real. The modern leftist wants a medical authoritarian state where there's almost no other rules in terms of social courtesy or anything else. It is all about It's all about controlling certain aspects of your life, your body, your health, whereas everything else is free reign as long as they're not offended.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Absolutely. Well, that'll do it for us on this episode of the WJ Live podcast, powered by the Western Journal. For Cameron Arcan, for Tara, I'm Grant. We thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the segments that we had today, the discussions that we had, please hit that like button like Cameron said, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell icon that is next to the subscribe button on YouTube. That'll ensure that you get notified when we have a new episode and that you don't get shadow banned from YouTube, from whatever big tech oligarchs are trying to block the episodes we're doing, block the information we're bringing to you. If you turn on the bell icon, you'll make sure that doesn't happen. And if you feel so inclined, you can also go to www.westernjournal.com/join. And for a relatively small price, a very reasonable price, you can support what we're doing here. You can support young journalists like myself and Cameron and Tara. And you can support us bringing you the truth and the things that you probably won't hear from a lot of other news sites. We are one of the few conservative and Christian websites and platforms in the country. And what we do costs a lot of money. And so we're not trying to swindle you. We're trying to, support truth and honest journalism. And if you want to contribute to that, we would certainly appreciate it. We will be back here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.